Hello everyone. First of all, accept my heartiest wishes on the occasion of Eid, and I hope that this Eid brings lot of happiness, good health, peace and prosperity in the life of all of us. On this occasion, on this holy day, I am again starting my discussions on the newspaper so that you understand what is important and what are the points that have to be taken on from the newspaper. Fine. So today there are two important issues in the newspaper. First is environment impact assessment, and the second is new education policy. There was an article on new education policy by Pratap Bhanu Mehta. Though article does not have any concrete points, a general criticism, there was an article on environment impact assessment by Suhrit Parthasarthi in Hindu, and I think that article does have a relevance. That article will have relevance in your GS paper 2 governance. It can have relevance in your GS paper 3. Similarly, in case of political science, there can be a question on this issue in the topic of Indian government and politics under the environmental movement. Both the two topics, the new education policy and environment issue, are important topics in your GS paper 2, and both the topics have relevance for your essay paper also. So I will give you a quick highlight of the first article which I found is more relevant, that is on environmental impact assessment. Fine. So what is the theme of this article and what are the salient points which are mentioned here? So this article on environment impact assessment, the context is the new policy, draft policy related to environment impact assessment, and there is a criticism of this policy among the members of civil society and environmental activists. And the article points towards the paradox that if you look at India's leading role in international climate change negotiations, there is a completely contrasting picture back home. And it is believed that the present developmental model is actually turning into more pro-industry and less towards the protection of environment, and somewhere in our quest for economic growth we are ignoring the fundamentals of the sustainable development and the inclusive growth. Now, the article also tells about the origin of the environment impact assessment as a part of global environmental movement which started in Stockholm in 1972. After that, the government of India has also brought Environment Protection Act, and after that the government has brought Environment Impact Assessment in 1994, which was revised in 2006, and again the government is planning to revise these guidelines. So you have to understand what exactly is an environment impact assessment, what is the procedure, and what change the government is going to bring. Fine. So as you know that industrialization as well as environment, industrialization and environmental degradation they are correlated, and the tragedy for the developing countries is that they have to go for the faster economic growth. As our former Prime Minister Indira Gandhi rightly held that poverty is the biggest pollutant. The countries in the third world requires know-how, that is technology. They require resources, and only then they can contribute in the mitigation and adaptation practices. However, we do not see the type of support promised by the developed countries in climate negotiations at United Nations, and as economic crisis around the world coupled with the COVID crisis, it is also testing our ability to cooperate. It has also adversely affected the developed countries. So there is a big question mark on the future ability of the mankind to do the needful in context of the growing challenge of environment. And if you see that India has played the leading role in environmental negotiations, even we see our Prime Minister is committed for the renewable energy, solar energy, but the type of the new guidelines in context of the environment impact assessment is putting a question mark on the approach of the government. Now, the biggest problem in the environment is for the developing countries, because they will have to go for the faster economic growth. If they do not generate the resources, how they can adopt the cleaner path of development. But before the process which becomes essential before that is really painful. The issue of climate justice or environmental justice is a major concern of the civil society. One of the prominent environmentalists in India, Sunita Narayan, she has said that the protection of environment is not about planting trees and protecting tigers. The entire idea of the protection of environment is about democracy. How to protect the environment? One approach is needed. And what is that approach? The approach is the protection of environment is not possible without democratization. You may be amazed that what is the relation between the democracy and the protection of environment. Fine. The relation has been accepted by the expert committees, the international bodies, and the first Earth Summit at Rio de Janeiro. It has accepted, it has come up with Agenda 21, and which believes that to go for sustainable development, we have to go for the empowerment of the masses. Because without empowerment of the people at the grassroots levels, we cannot achieve sustainable development and inclusive growth. And the expert view is that the natural resource management, the natural resource management should be into the hands of the people or the original inhabitants. Fine, because they are the one who are going to be most affected by environmental tragedies, and they are the one who are concerned with, and they are the one who can ensure the transparency and accountability. There is one scholar, Eleanor Ostrom. I will recommend you should read about Eleanor Ostrom. She was even awarded the Nobel Prize in Economy because of her studies about how community participation provides the best way for the natural resource management. Now, understand the concept of environment impact assessment. As the environmental consciousness has been growing and India has been taking lead on the environmental issues at the global front, we have seen certain measures taken back at home. One of the measure was Environment Protection Act. Second is Environment Impact Assessment. Okay. So the idea of environment impact assessment is the Ministry of Environment, before allowing certain industries, will ensure their environment impact assessment. Means how much impact the project is going to cost to the environment. Even I would like to refer to Sunita Narayan, who talks about new developmentalism. Now, new developmentalism says that we cannot afford to stop the industrial development, but at the same time we also need, we cannot go for business as usual, and we need to shift towards the model of development which is sustainable, which is people centric also. Fine. So in environment impact assessment, the idea is one should go for the cost and benefit analysis, and we have to see that the cost to the environment and the benefit proclaimed by the governments in terms of employment generation or economic growth, is there a rationale behind it or not. Fine. So the environment impact assessment process has been introduced, and the best part of the environment impact assessment process that was existing here was the participation of the people. So before giving yes to the project, one has to get the environment impact assessment from the government, and the government procedure was that it will require the participation of the people, the views of the locals, that will be given due weightage in the impact assessment. Now, it is believed that the new guidelines, it turns the entire idea of environment impact assessment upside down. How? The most critical part of this policy is environment impact assessment with retrospective effect, or you can say ex post facto. The original idea is first have environment impact assessment, and after that start the project. But as per the new guidelines, you can start the project, and if it costs environment, then ex post facto you can pay the compensation. So the very idea of environment impact assessment has gone, it has become meaningless. Along with that, the number of sectors which will be considered as strategic are going to increase, for which there will be exemption from environment impact assessment. So these are certain points which are mentioned in this article, and this is the main point. Okay, and how important is the environment impact assessment and how costly this policy can be understood from the fact that recently we have seen two tragedies. One, the tragedy of gas leak in Andhra Pradesh, Vishakhapatnam, and other is the fire in the oil well in Assam. Assam being a very rich area in terms of biological diversity, so we cannot even assume what amount of losses has happened because of it, and the reports show that both these projects were not given, or they were not having the environmental clearance, but they were continuing the project. Fine. So here in this article, this author has also mentioned certain quotes. These quotes also you can note it down, because in the essay, in a global environmental movement, in environmental movement in Indian context, you can utilize it. Fine. So this is the main theme, that it appears that the government is actually diluting it, and the discretionary powers of the government may perhaps increase. Okay, so let me show you the articles. So I think from today's paper, this is the only relevant topic that I found in today's paper. diluting the environment impact process spell a path of no return. Fine. So here just a information that there is some NGO which has received a government notice, and that they have been accused of unlawful activities, and it is mentioned that the basic reason was they were asking about the information, but we are not concerned with this part. We have to understand the analytical part. So this first line you can leave, second line also you can leave. Fine. This paragraph also you can leave, there is nothing to note it down. This is also saying that the COVID crisis, and because of the lockdown there is a improvement in the state of environment. Fine, but very soon we may go back to the normal. Fine. So till this paragraph there is nothing which we should be noting down. Till this paragraph there is only one point. Bill McKibben wrote in New Yorker that normal is the enemy. Fine. So suppose an essay on environment comes, you can start the essay with this quote, normal is the enemy. So corona crisis has created new normal, but very soon we will go back to the normal. Fine. The culture of disregard. The proposed new environment impact policy symbolizes a rush to restore the society where it was before. So even this paragraph is not needed. So from UPSC point of view, the relevant information is in the second column, the last paragraph, that is environment impact assessment is started in 60s at the global level. Fine, this is one point you can note besides that quote. So you should note down in your copies this statement that can be used and this information that it is started. Next is, it took India though until 1994 before it notified its first set of assessment norms under the Environment Protection Act. Fine. So Environment Protection Act is started in 1986 and Environment Impact Assessment in 1994. Then this is important paragraph because it is explaining what is it. This policy mandated that projects beyond a certain size from certain sectors like mining, thermal power plants, ports, airports, atomic energy secure an environmental clearance as a precondition to their commencement. So basically environment impact assessment is a first step, and then you can start the project. But government is doing the upside down. Fine. And this line I will note down for myself. However, this environment impact assessment has been subjected to the regular amendments. Fine. Now, abandoning the rigor. So, the rigor of the idea is being abandoned, and the only thing is that a new policy came in 2006 under the corporate pressure, but ironically, it gave role to the public. So, this is again an important paragraph. The new draft attempted to decentralize the process. It increased the number of projects that required environmental clearance. So, this is also a good point, but also created an appraisal committee at the level of both center and state, the recommendations of which were made qualification for sanctioning. What is more, the program, this is the most important point. What is more, the program mandated that pollution control boards hold a public hearing to glean the concerns of those living around the site of the project. Fine. So 1994 it was started. Industry always found it problematic. So, though industry pressurized, government issued new guidelines, but the 2006 policy had some strong features that they have increased the number of industries requiring the environment impact assessment and introduced the concept of public hearing. Okay, but in practice, 2006 notification proved regressive. Now, this is again very important point. This practice is very important, very ideal, that you are involving the people and asking their opinions, those who are living in that area. But the regressive measure there was not made available. The final report, this was the regressive measure. Fine. Because the final report was not made available to the public. Okay, then what is the use? So 2006 policy, good thing was number of industries requiring the clearance increased. Then second thing, taking the opinion of the people living in that area. But the weak point was the final report was never made public. So what you will write in your notes, you should note when environmental impact assessment was introduced, what were the features in 1994, in 2006, what were the positive points and what were the negative points. Fine. For security clearance, and there was little scope available for independent judicial review, because most of the time judiciary accepted the government point of view. When clearances were challenged, court treated the views of assessment authorities as sacrosanct. In the process, environment impact assessment, far from serving as a bulwark for environmental justice, came to be regarded as a mere inconvenience, as a bureaucratic exercise that promotes the project and navigate through. So, in your GS paper 2, there is a section where analyze the challenges or drawbacks of the policy planning formulation. So, in this context also, this is important. Fine. Now, this paragraph you can leave. Except this, that 2006 notification brought new subject to the less demanding process. Fine. Government is introducing the new. Fine. It enables a sweeping clearance, new policy sweeping clearance to a number of critical projects which previously required the environment impact assessment of special rigor, where some industries required expert appraisal. These include aerial ropeways, metallurgical industries. This is information with respect to the present. Fine. Now, this is the very important point. It opens up the window for securing post facto clearances. Post facto clearances means what is the use of environment impact assessment, and companies can pay the fine at the cost of 5,000 rupees per day, which is nothing if you see the amount of the damage these projects can do. Fine. The companies which have commenced a project without a valid certificate will be allowed to regularize their operations by paying a fine. This point you should understand. If there is a singular logic to the process, it is that environment clearance is a prerequisite to the launching of the project. But here the government wants to revert the fundamental tenet. There is no doubt that mere strengthening will not be sufficient. You have to develop a new culture where we start protecting the environment. So I think these are the lines you must note down in your diaries. Now here there are two important quotes. Rest you can leave. S. Purdy argues that ecological and egalitarian projects have to be together. Without this, there cannot be any justice. This you can use to show your approach in your essays. This is fine, but good line. We need broader vision, deeper thinking, greater political initiative, and a leap of faith. But in the meantime, to allow the government to weaken, the process has potential to make things irredeemable. This is another quote which you can note down. Whether we and our politicians know it or not, nature is party to all our deals and decisions. It has more votes, longer memory, and a sterner sense of justice than we have. So all the three quotes very important, and I don't think it will take much time to note down the key points from this article. Now along with this article, few days back there was a FAQ in Indian Express. So if you will read both the two together, you can also get to know few factual aspects related to the environment. Fine. In explained section in Indian Express, you can leave this much part. Fine. And this also helps in bringing the clarity on the issue. So you can read the contention. Though established to safeguard the environment, the process, activists argue, often achieve the opposite by creating a facade of the legal framework, paperwork, and nothing else. And if you see, consultant agencies, they prepare the reports and hardly they are held accountable, or hardly there is any real check on what report they are producing. Then the draft offers no remedy for political and bureaucratic stronghold. Instead, it proposes to bolster the government's discretionary power while limiting the public engagement in safeguarding the environment. So this is another important point. Next, discretionary powers, as government can decide which projects are strategic projects, and new long list of projects are exempted. So this is a factual part which you can see. Now the two most significant changes is government abandoning the public trust doctrine. Public trust is like natural resources to be controlled, to be taken over by the control or the administration of natural resources should be done by the government on behalf of the people. But when you are reducing the role of the people, you are abandoning it. Fine. And second very important thing is you can operate without clearance and you can just pay the fines. And according to this article is contrary to Supreme Court direction. So even if you will read these two things together, you will find it relevant. Fine. Now the next topic, though written by one of the great public intellectuals, but I don't find much important points or any solid points in that article on the new education policy. So before, there is nothing much which I have to explain. Before reading the article by Pratap Bhanu Mehta, we can have a look on the new education policy in the explained section in Indian Express. What is the purpose of new education policy? So first time education policy was made in 1968, then in 1986, slightly revised in 1992, and since then it is long overdue. And what are the key takeaways? As you know, they are going to change the system of school education, and as mentioned that the focus will be on experiential learning, developing the critical ability. That's a good thing. Introduction of the multidisciplinary approach, shifting the focus from exam to the learning, and going for creating a focus on vocational training and giving opportunity to the students that they can leave their education, they can go for internship, etc. So I think if you want to read, this is the quite enough document, not much. Fine. And then let us see the arguments of Pratap Bhanu Mehta in Indian Express. So today itself you should make the notes from that environment. That is a very good article. Fine. So Pratap Bhanu Mehta, he considers the new education policy as a forward-looking framework for transforming Indian education. Fine. So it is a good change because we have not been focusing on the quality of education. Again, a good point is this will focus on critical thinking and free inquiry. Fine, but then he talks about the context and he believes that there is a growth of state control, a sort of an Orwellian state in India, and the social political environment is not that free and open for critical thinking. Like there has been the arrest of certain intellectuals called as urban Naxals, then contempt of court proceeding against Prashant Bhushan. So in this context, he says that the problem is not in the text of the policy, the problem is the context in which it is being introduced, and if this type of environment is continuing, so there will be a big gap in the realization of its objective. So this is his view. So his view is a free education system cannot flourish without a free society. Fine. So I don't think much to note down, but or you can note down the drawbacks because it is in your syllabus. The document lays down the objectives, but strategy is yet to come. There is yet another promise of a new regulator, new research foundation, but a lot will depend upon the norms of you create a new institution, but how it will perform. That is a big question mark. What norms government will set up for the new regulator. So what he says, this is his personal opinion, that the problem comes from context rather than text. And then he also appreciate the introduction of mother tongue, Indian civilizational history. Fine. Now he says that the most promising part is that it really tries to revamp the school education, which is it aims at holistic education. Fine. And this is the most important aspect. And he doesn't want that every institution becomes multidisciplinary. Institutions should retain their unique identities. This is also he believes that, and that is why he says that multidisciplinary is too much and that is not really needed. And then the success to certain extent will okay. So he says that we should not be having similar similar type of institutions, but there should be different type of institutions. Rest is I don't see much, but the only thing is says that it is an admirable document which is focusing on important question. Fine. So I think not much from Pratap Bhanu Mehta's article, but that environment justice article, do make a note now itself, finish it now, so that it doesn't become tempting, because you will have to do it day by day, and the better is you can write in the papers, and again some article on new education policy comes or on environment impact assessment, you can just keep on adding the points. So let us see on this auspicious day, I have again started this discussion, and I'll pray to the God, to Allah, that God give me the strength that I can continue this. Thank you.